Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics for the PowerBasic console compiler. Today we will look at displaying information on the console. Today we're going to be continuing our use of the PowerBasic console compiler. And our object for today is to display information on the console. As you can see, we have the skeleton of our new application on screen, with two include files, the Windows API include and the PB Common Console Functions include. As you will see from the Common Console Functions include file, there are two functions within this library, one to allow us to exit the application after a delay, and one to append to a file. In the PowerBasic console compiler, there are a number of commands specific for the console, and one of these allows you to set the colour of both the foreground and the background in the console. If we have a look at the PowerBasic help, we'll see that the colour command for the console takes two parameters and a third optional parameter. We're going to be dealing mainly with the first two parameters today. These parameters allow you to set the foreground colour to one of these 16 colours by specifying a number, and the same for the background colour. If you wish to leave one of these the colour it currently is, you can use the value -1. However, having these numbers hard-coded into your application all over the place can be sometimes a little difficult to follow. So what we are going to do is to add an enumeration to our library, allowing us in this common library to reference these colours by name rather than by number. So let's go have a look at our code. And this is going to be our enumeration. We're calling the enumeration colour, and we're setting the first value equal to 0. So to reference this in code, we would reference it by the %sign, the word colour, a dot, and then the word black. This would give us a value at compile time of 0. With this enumeration, the blue would be value 1, the green would be value 2, and so on. So this will make your code much more readable and will save having to remember the actual numbers of these constants. And placing this enumeration within our library means anytime we wish to use these, we only have to include the library at the beginning of our application. So let's now get on with our coding. We're going to be using the randomize function within our application. So our first task is to initialize the random number generator. We can do this quite easily by using the randomize command, following it with a seed. If you wish our seed to be different every time the application runs, we'll need to provide a different number, and we can do this quite easily by using the inbuilt timer function. So the task for this application is to display a number of companies and their share prices on the console, to emulate what a share tracker application would do. So we're going to need an array to store our information, and I'm going to set up a user-defined type to allow us to store that information. So here is our user-defined type, which we're calling UDT companies. It has 4 elements. We have the name of our company, which is going to be a string of 20 characters in length. We're going to store a current price, just as whole numbers for this demonstration, a last price, and the price at the start of the day. We can then dimension a global array to hold this information. And there is our global array. Now we'll need to know exactly how many companies we're going to keep track of, so I'm going to set up some constants to allow us to do that. And here are our constants. We have a constant for the maximum number of companies we're going to keep track of, which in this case is 10. And we're going to cycle through 15 times for the processing of our shares. And to display the information on screen, we're going to set up a header which will have the company, the price, the change, and a column called today. We'll cover this later on in the application when we're going to display these share prices on the screen. So having dimensioned our global array for companies, we now need to redimension it for the size we wish it to be. So here is our redim command, redimensioning the companies array. We're setting up as a single dimension array from 1 to the maximum number of companies. And we're dimensioning it as this user-defined type, which we have just defined. So next, we will prepare our console for use. As we're going to use a number of console commands, I'm going to use the prefix command here to save a little bit of typing. And here is that preparation. We're setting the caption, the title of the window, to be console demo. And here is where we set the color command. You can see in here we're using one of our enumerations for the foreground color. So it's quite easy to see on screen, this is going to be light green. And the background color is going to be unchanged. The default for the background is currently black, and we're setting our console window up as being virtual in size, with a number of columns and rows. And we can also set the location on screen of where the console is going to appear. In this case, the top left-hand corner of our primary screen. So in order to test this first part out, we'll put our exit app function at the end of the application to allow us to test compile. It compiles cleanly, and if we run the application now, there is our console window at the top of the screen, waiting for 3 seconds and then terminating. So our preparations are complete. So we now need to run a number of functions to set our system up. First of all, we will prepare the companies array. And we will do that by using a new function called prep companies. So the purpose of this function is to populate the companies global array. So here is the skeleton of our prep companies function. I've set up a number of local variables. We're going to have a counter to allow us to step through the array. And I'm setting up 2 local arrays, name1 and name2. We're going to populate these with names. These will give us information which we can randomly pick out of to name our companies. And to do this, we're using the array assign command, assigning the 10 values to each of the elements within these name1 and name2 arrays. So the name of the companies is going to be formed up randomly from an element from the name1 and an element from name2. So now we're going to use a for next loop to run through each of the elements within our global array. So here is our for next loop, going from 1 to the maximum number of companies, which currently is 10. Our first task is to blank out the name. And then while the name is blank, we're going to run inside this while loop. And this is where our random number generator comes in. We're going to generate a random number between 1 and 10. This is going to give us a pointer to each of these 2 arrays to allow us to pick up the element from the first array and the element from the second array. And this will form up the name of our company. However, there's always a chance that the name that we have randomly selected has already been put into the array. We don't want duplicate names. So we will need to test to see if a duplicate currently exists in the global array. So we'll create another function to return true if the value is duplicate. If this does return true, then we're blanking out the name. Therefore, when the wend instruction is executed, it will repeat this loop. If name is no longer blank, then we will drop out the loop and go on to the next iteration of the main for next loop. We will create this new duplicate function in a moment, but let's continue and finish this function before we go on to do that. So exiting the when loop, we can then populate the global array with the name of the company. So having populated the name, we now have to populate the rest of the elements within our global array. For example, the price, the last price, and the day start. So we're going to use the prefix command here to save a little bit of coding. So at the moment, we're going to set the current price for all our companies to the same value of 1,000. And initially, we will set the last price and the day start to that same value. Now that we've completed this function, we can now go ahead and create the duplicate function to allow us to determine whether the name we have just selected is already in the global array or not. This is going to be a very simple for next loop. And here is that new duplicate function. We're taking a single parameter, which is the name of the new company. And if the name happens to be blank, then we'll return the value function equals true, because we don't want any blank names for any of the companies. Next, we will do a for next loop, looking through each element within the company's array. As the string held within the company's array is a fixed length of 20 characters, we want to trim it to trim off any characters from the end, and the same of the parameter we're passing in. If these values match, then the function returns the value true and we exit the function immediately. Otherwise, we step through each of the other elements within the array. And if we get to the end of the for next loop, it will return the value false by default. So this will populate our global array. So if we go back to the PB main function, the next task after prepping the companies is to do some processing. So we're going to need another function. We'll call this one start processing. Within this start processing function, we're going to be displaying information on the screen. And as such, the colors are going to be changing. So we're going to be setting the values of our screen back to normal. So we'll use a color command to set the foreground color to green and the background color to black. We can also use the cell function. This will set the location on screen of where we're going to be printing next. And I'm going to be setting this to the maximum number of companies, which is 10 plus 5. So it will be 5 characters below the table we're going to display on screen. And the second parameter is the column counter. So we're starting on the first column on the left-hand side. And we're going to print out to this the words press any key to continue, and then use the wait key command to wait for input. As each of these commands starts with the word con, we can actually use the prefix command here quite happily. And there we go, our code is now parceled up within a prefix command. So let's now go and create the start processing function. So here is the skeleton of our start processing function taking no parameters. So I'm going to create a local variable to allow us to loop through this a number of times. So the first thing we will need to do is to prepare our screen. So we will create a function to perform that. And we'll call that function prepare screen. We'll create that one in a moment. But as we're going to be doing a number of cycles, a number of loops through this, we're going to use a for next loop. And this is where our max cycles constant comes in. We're going to go from 1 to the maximum number of cycles. And within this loop, we're going to be calling a function called display prices. This function is the one that will actually display the prices on the screen. And between each iteration of this loop, we will sleep for 1 second, 1000 milliseconds. So let's now go and create the prepare screen function. And here is the skeleton of our new prepare screen function. And we're setting up a row and a column. When printing to the console, you can print away quite happily by using the con print command. However, the console has one trick that can be used quite easily to prepare a screen, and that is the page command. As you will see from the help file, there are indeed 8 pages within the console, and you can set which of these pages is active and which is visible. This allows you to use one of the pages as a template, which you can populate once and reuse a number of times by copying that page to another page which is currently active and visible to the user. This allows you to set up a buffer screen. So what we're doing here is we're setting the active page to page number 2 and using the CLS command to clear that console. And now we're going to populate our row and column and setting the cell position to first row and first column. Next, we're going to print out the header we set up as a constant at the beginning of our application. So we're using the print command to print that header out to our console. And what we're printing to is page number 2. And following the printing of the header, we're printing a number of underlines. We're using the string command to do this. The string command returns a string consisting of multiple copies of a particular character. And we can use the length of the header so that the underline appears under every single character in our header. So having populated our page 2, we can now use the pcopy command to copy page 2 to page 1, and then make page 1 visible to the user. This leaves page 2 holding our template. This templated buffer can contain any information you wish. So now that we have prepared our screen, let's try running the application now, but avoiding the display prices and our delay. So there we have our application running with the information displayed on the console. We have 4 columns: company, price, change, and the word today. And underneath it we have underlines for the full length of our header, with the words "press any key to continue" below where the share prices are going to be. If we press a key on the keyboard, it will then wait 3 seconds and then exit the application. So we're now ready to display our share prices. So we'll now create the display prices function. So here we have the skeleton of our new display prices function with a number of local variables. As we have our headers displayed on screen, we'll want to display our share prices below those headers, so we can set our row and columns appropriately. So we're going to set the row to row 3 and the column to position 1. And we want to display all 10 companies. So we'll do another for next loop for each of the 10 companies we have. And within this loop, we're going to increment our row counter and reset our column to position number 1. So now we need to print the information from the companies array, starting with the name of the company. And as this array is a user-defined type, that's quite easily done by this construct: the name of the array, the element we are referencing, and the part of the user-defined type we wish to print. So we're printing the name, followed by a semicolon. This means the name is printed and then we do not go on to the next line. And we're then printing out the current price. So if we try running our application now, we would get all the names of the companies, which are unique, and all the prices, which are currently set to 1,000. So all we need to do now is to work out change and a today value. What I'm going to do within this function for displaying prices is to display the current price and then in the next iteration either increase or decrease the values. That will allow us to show the change between one of these loops and the next, and the today column will be showing the difference between the original price when we started the application and the current price. So once more, back to the code. So first of all, we're going to work out the difference between the current price and the last price. So this is quite easily done by taking the current price and subtracting the last price for this particular company and placing the value in our difference variable. As I'm going to want to right justify the text in a string, we're going to use the rset command. First of all, we're going to prep a string variable with 7 characters. And we can do that quite easily by using the space command. Next, we will use the rset command. The rset command will right justify the numbers in our string. The rset command will take the 7 spaces within this difference variable and place our text, which in this case is going to be the difference. And we're using the format command to display it either with a plus at the beginning or a minus. And as we know we're dealing with 4 character numbers, we're using the hash value to define that in the format command. Next, to give a bit of clarity, we'll want to set the color, depending on whether the price is the same, has gone up, or has gone down. And we can do this quite easily by using the color command and an if statement. If the difference is less than 0, then we're changing the foreground color to red and the background color to black. If the difference is 0, then we're making the foreground color white and the background color black. And if the value is otherwise, it must have gone up in price. Therefore, we're making the foreground colour green and the background colour black. So next we have to decide where we're actually printing this value. So we're going to set the column number and then print the information out to our screen. So we'll set the column number to 27 and the console command to position our cursor on the screen, and then use the print command to print out the value in the difference variable. If we attempt to run that now, we'll see that the change is showing as 0 because nothing has changed at the moment. So the next task is to report since the start of day. And we will use the same kind of approach again. We're working out our differences. And we are right justifying the value into this difference variable once more. And now we're going to use the color command to determine the color to display on screen. And as we did before, we need to set the column position to print this information. And in this case, we're going for column number 34, printing out the difference and then changing the foreground color back to green. Next, ready for the next iteration, we need to advance the prices of all our share values. So we're making the last price equal to the current price, and we're resetting the current price by adding on to the current price two random numbers, one between 1 and 5, and subtracting another value between 1 and 5. And let's try running the application once more. And we should now have colours in both the change and today columns. And as we can see, the current price is displayed after each iteration. And the change between that iteration and the previous one is displayed in the change column. And the overall change between the original value, for example, this brown construction has gone from 1000 to 1006, so that is a change of 6 units. Between the 1006 and its previous iteration, it was at one point as high as 1008. So we can see there are two shares which have gained the most since we started the application: red mining and black shipping, both having gone up by 13. So there's one thing more we can do in our application to make our screen a little more readable. As it's all colours on a black background, we may want to change the background colour on each second row. So at the beginning of our for next loop, we're going to use the mod command. And here is the change to the code. We're testing the value of C, which is our loop counter between each company. If the remainder of long C divided by 2 is 0, then we are using a color command to make the foreground color black and the background color grey. Otherwise, we're sticking with the foreground color green and the background color black. If we try running the application once more, we'll see we now have each alternate line with a different background colour, making it easy to distinguish between lines on the screen. So in summary, what we've done today is we've used our console to display a selection of share prices, reporting on the company name, the current price, the change since the last cycle, and the change since the application was first run. It's a day value. To display this on screen, we're using the console pages, setting up a blank screen with page 2. And each iteration of our cycles, we're displaying that page on screen and then repopulating the entire screen. This method of using the page gives you a template or multiple templates you can use to quickly update the screen with the minimal amount of code. Hopefully you'll find these techniques useful in your own applications, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching today's video. Please feel free to click on the link in the description below to discover more videos.